Good morning. Let me start by looking at a snapshot of the interesting budget the minister has just declared in Parliament. It's very important what she's done, because she's given a very valuable snapshot of how India's budgetary framework needs to evolve over the medium term. We all know that India needs to bring down its public debt while raising catalytic spending that will raise growth. So what the minister has done is interesting. She has reduced the deficit target to 5.9, which is good. She has raised capital spending, and I'll come back to that in a moment. She has rightly begun the process of reducing what we call in India revenue spending, spending on current expenditures, pensions, this and that. She started to reduce subsidies. I think she's building in a cushion to achieve the deficit target. She's doing this in different ways, such as the projection for committed spending, perhaps, such as through the projection of nominal GDP growth. Both will likely be missed in manners that will help keep the budget deficit down. She has also, I presume, continued the process and has now eliminated all off-budget spending and off-budget financing, which had grown immensely in the last few years. She has begun to reduce this last 2 years. And there is the issue of cesses and surcharges, which all the states worry about. I think in this new budget, she slightly raised it in one area, and then there's been some tinkling in other areas, but there isn't a big loss, isn't a big drop in cesses and surcharges that the states want. Now, I'm going through these briefly because in order to continue this process over time, say over the next 5 or 7 or 10 years, to reduce the deficit and the debt and raise growth is going to be an incredibly difficult task. For example, reducing revenue spending in many ways may be more difficult than raising capital spending. Same with reducing subsidies and keeping them down. The same with eliminating off-budget financing. So I'm saying she's given us a very good snapshot. She's taken all the right steps in this budget, but these have to be sustained in a more significant way over the medium term and jointly so. Now, second point, we've all focused on the announcement of the increase in capital investment by the government. It's an increase of 33%, which by coincidence, I think works out to an increase of 3.3% of GDP. And this has received great praise across the media. No doubt, this is what India needs to do. Let's now talk of two components, two ways to look at this. Firstly, will this be an increase in capital investment? That is not sure, because it is most likely that the PCUs will be unable to raise the resources to raise their own capital investment. So PSU investment is needed to look at the overall general government expansion. That will probably offset the increase done by the central government. Then what's going to loans, we know from last year, 50-year loans, we don't know if they will be borrowed. We don't know what they will be spent on. We don't know if there will be simply a source of spending change. So no increase in actual capex by state, just a change in the funding source. And as we looked at last year, the same thing was done. We know that all the loans to states estimated in last year's budget have not been availed of by all the states. So we're not sure of the extent that will actually be done looking at the government as a whole, the general government, the center, the states, and the PSUs. People don't care about increase by one of the three components. It should be an increase in the general government and public sector. Finally, the increases taking place may not be the same. The loans are going to some corporations which might use them to boost their equity instead of raising capital spending. And frankly, if a lot is being relied on railways and highways, highways has used a lot of off-budget in the past. If you're relying on railways and highways to have the projects ready to increase spending quickly this year, it will probably not happen on a one-year basis because that's not how their projects are prepared. Therefore, overall, I don't think there's going to be a high push in capital spending this year. But as I said, what the minister has done is very important signal. This needs to happen. Now, there are two remaining issues. Firstly, what is the investment going to be on? Is it going to be on human capital? Is it going to be on nutrition, on primary education, primary health, areas where the 15th Finance Commission has strongly recommended? Or is it going to be on physical infrastructure? These are big differences in their catalyst effects on short-term growth and long-term growth. There is no doubt that for longer-term sustainable, inclusive growth, there has to be more focus on primary education, primary health, nutrition, and those areas. If this is on infrastructure, instead, as it appears to be, it may help in the short run, raising demand by raising wages and labor and holding up overall demand, but it may not be the most useful for India's inclusive growth over the longer term and meeting the objectives that these human capital sectors need. Finally, my final point is this. We look back at countries such as China, whose growth over the last 20 years has been based on incredible capital investment. And most of us sit back, sometimes enjoy, but always praise the amazing success of Chinese capital investment. Well, the fact is, that is not the case. There is virtually no country that has had more inefficient investment in capital expenditure than China. This has been well documented over the years. The reason is they didn't follow what is prescribed. A public investment management program, together with the public investment financial management program, so we know what's being spent on. We have outcome targets. We have measures to see what is the return after 2 years. But if you are spending without making clear the medium-term context, the alignment with current spending, the components, and all with outcome-based parameters, you're not going to find out if these are efficient. You only find out when you finish the project, it may look good, but it's taken longer. It's taken a huge increase in cost above the initial estimates. And most importantly, the debt is extremely high. So whatever we do with capital expenditure, India has got to adopt reforms in public investment management, so we know exactly what is being spent, by who, in what year, aligning the individual first year with the medium term with sufficient performance-based targets. So all the points the minister has made in the snapshot are brilliant because they tell us what will happen and what needs to happen in the next 5 to 10 years if we are going to reduce our debt in a sensible way and raise inclusive growth over the longer term. So those are my comments on the budget, which is brilliant in setting out the picture for the next 10 years. Thank you.